Well, here's a completely unplanned video. I just happened to see the 2016 Ghostbusters for the first time in my life. I generally avoided this movie when it came out. I had no interest in seeing it, and I know everyone was going crazy to see it, to, dump on it and say how bad it was. I didn't have high expectations for it, and a lot of the controversy where people tried to drag James Rolfe through the mud over it, which I'm a huge James Rolfe fan, and I thought it was very unjust what people did to him. A lot of that just turned me off to the movie. It just didn't look funny. It didn't look like something I really cared about, and we have another Ghostbusters movie on the horizon. It's supposed to be connected to the old movies, but to be honest, I'm not too excited about that one either. I mean, I'll check it out, but I'm not that hyped for a new Ghostbusters movie. I'm kind of fine with it just being a product of its time. But for whatever reason, I just decided, hey, I'm finally going to watch that 2016 Ghostbusters movie. So I went in with a very fresh mind. Now, just to put stuff in perspective, I love the Ghostbusters, but I don't think I'm quite as crazy for Ghostbusters as most people from my generation and a little older than me are. Ghostbusters have really always been part of my life. I had some of the toys as a kid from Kenner, and I saw both movies at a very young age. They've pretty much always been part of my life. I even remember seeing the real Ghostbusters cartoon when I was little, a lot of times on TV. But it was quite never on the level of, Super Mario Brothers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and stuff for me. Like, that was top tier stuff. And then a few tiers down was Ghostbusters. It was not like a huge fandom of mine. It was just something that I knew about, and I knew I liked it. My love for the franchise has probably grown over the course of my life. I do absolutely love Ghostbusters, but like I said, not my top favorite franchise. There's just so many things I love that even something I like as much as Ghostbusters gets knocked down a few pegs because of all the other things. But Ghostbusters is one of those things that it was just lightning in a bottle. It came out at the right time, by the right people. All the right things just happened all at once. Perfect cast, perfect writing, perfect directing, perfect time. Everything just worked out in its favor. It was so fresh and new and unique when it came out, and it was just so well done. The jokes were funny, the characters clicked, the special effects were amazing, the lore was interesting, the whole concept was just appealing. And there's been many movies that have tried to do that again. I know Evolution tried that, and that was pretty awful. But it just seems like the kind of thing you can never really do again. I know a lot of people hate on Ghostbusters 2. It's notoriously disliked by the fan base. Obviously, it's not as good as the first Ghostbusters. Nothing with that brand name is ever going to be as good as that. But I think Ghostbusters 2 is pretty darn good. Its biggest crime is that it does just rewrite things very lazily just so they can redo the same thing, like Venkman and Dana's relationship blossoming again. But for the most part, I think it's a damn good movie. It's funny, it has very memorable moments, and in a lot of ways, they didn't just try to redo the first movie. They tried some new, bold things that just kind of built on it. It was almost like the real Ghostbusters cartoon, just with a bigger budget and, the actual actors and live action and all that stuff. Like, it was just a good addition. I would have liked to see more sequels in that style. I honestly don't need more sequels, but if we got like a trilogy or quadrilogy back then, and they were all on par with Ghostbusters 2, I think they would have been legendary. It's unfair usually to hold a sequel up to the standards of the first movie, because the first movie is the one where we fall in love with the franchise. We meet the characters. We see the world for the first time. We are introduced to this great idea. It blows our mind. In a sequel, we're already familiar with that. We know we love the characters. We love all these things. And we're just moving forward. And honestly, I think that's a bit of a problem sometimes because our expectations will get so high from how much we love the first one that the second one has much bigger shoes to fill. So I think if you just look at Ghostbusters 2 as here's the next adventure in the story of the Ghostbusters, I think it's a darn good movie. But this is not a Ghostbusters 2 review. So let's get to the movie that we'll be talking about today. Ghostbusters from 2016. I think they tacked on some other title, like Answer the Call or something, or Who You Gonna Call, or nobody said it. It's just Ghostbusters 2016. So people had been asking for Ghostbusters 3 for ages, and it just wasn't gonna happen. Bill Murray didn't want to do it. There was always complications. There were so many rumors of it starting, and it was never gonna happen. And unfortunately, Harold Ramis passed away, and after that, it just seemed like Ghostbusters is a done deal. But then they decided to reboot it. I don't get the trend of just rebooting everything over and over and over again. That is all we get today, is reboots or sequels to movies from 30 or 40 years ago. It's a concept that's been done so many times, I don't even get how these movies are still making money. And most of them don't, because this was a pretty big flop. This movie's biggest problem, I feel, is that it doesn't know what it wants to do. Half the time, it's trying really hard to be different from the original and be its own thing and reinvent the Ghostbusters. But then the other half of the time, it is 100% piggybacking off the nostalgia of the original. I can't imagine watching this movie with no knowledge of the Ghostbusters prior and getting half of it. It's just gonna seem so random and weird. The revealing of the logo and the Ecto-1, and they even throw in the firehouse even though they don't end up using it, are just there because we're supposed to go, oh, I remember that. That's the thing from the original. Now they explained how they got it. Woo! It's not necessary. I don't really get why it has to do that. I think this movie is at its worst when it's trying to please the old fans. It does something I really hate too, that the first example I can think of a movie that did the same thing recently is the remake of Pet Sematary. But it's been done a million times, where they start doing one of the scenes from the original movie and the music swells and we think it's going to happen the way it happened in the original movie, and then just as it's about to go the way it used to go, whoop, they twist it on us and something different happens. In Pet Sematary, they do it where we think the little boy is gonna die, but nope, it turns out the little girl dies. Isn't that different? Totally different idea. I know, totally different movie. Now it was worth making because you swapped the gender of the child who dies. And that's what this movie does a lot. There's constant moments like that, like the firehouse, where they say they want to take the firehouse, but then it turns out to be too expensive, and they end up just going to a Chinese restaurant. They could have just done the Chinese restaurant from the beginning. The only reason that's there is because we're supposed to go, oh, that's the place from the original. That's funny. The original ones went there, but they can't afford it, so they go to a Chinese restaurant. Isn't that wacky? And that's where a lot of the scripted humor in the movie comes from, is just trying to do what the original did and then twisting it. Another thing they do that I hate, that they do a lot in these sequels or reboots, where they have to mention something from the original and then they have to point out how dumb it is. They start like trying to attack it with logic and show like, oh, see, the original was actually kind of stupid because they never thought about this. There's a moment where they're talking with the mayor and they're talking about how, oh, you ride around in a hearse with a ghost on the side of it, and you're blaring sirens that are clearly not American sirens. So you have any idea how many violations you're breaking right there? And it's like, they're trying to like be all tongue-in-cheek, like, see, the original was kind of dumb. That could never happen. These characters can never drive around with this siren on and not go to jail. And it's like, well, I mean, you also can't have a Sumerian god take the shape of a giant marshmallow man and get shot by a bunch of laser lassos and sent to another friggin' dimension. Nothing in the movie makes sense. It's fantasy. It's just supposed to be fun. I hate that new approach a lot of movies do, where they're just too embarrassed to be themselves. They constantly have to take a step back and look at the camera and say, look, we know this is stupid. We're going to acknowledge it's stupid, but then we're going to do it anyway. It doesn't make the movie better, it just takes me out of the movie and makes me not actually care about the characters or the world. But I've ranted enough about that. Let's talk about the characters. So they very easily could have just done, here's, the new Bill Murray, here's the new Dan Aykroyd, here's the new Harold Ramis, here's the new Ernie Hudson. They actually don't do that, to the film's credit. Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy's characters can almost both be seen as Ray, which was Dan Aykroyd's character. They're both very nerdy, they're both very into this technical side of the ghost busting. They use all the big words and everything, but to a certain degree, Kate McKinnon's character is also like that too. Kate McKinnon's character is almost like the new Egon, but she's like the weird, wild card, socially awkward, but kind of badass version of him. I don't really know what to say about her. To be honest, she was actually my least favorite character. I felt like she just wasn't funny. I kind of get what type of humor they were going for with the character. It just did not land. It was just awful. I didn't laugh at anything she said in the whole movie. And then Leslie Jones is just kind of doing Leslie Jones. Like, she has her whole shtick that she does. And she's not horrible. She's not bad. She does good with what she's given. But again, I don't think I actually laughed at anything she said. Maybe I got a chuckle once. I do think Kristen Wiig had the best character. She had the most likable character. She had sort of a cute dorkiness about her. She's kind of awkward, but she's trying to be very professional, and it worked a little bit. There was some charm there. I think she made her performance as charming as she possibly could with the horrible material that she was being given. But the improv with her just becomes wince-worthy. It's just not good. They try to have all these actresses just do these, raw, unscripted comedy bits. And it's like, you can feel when it's happening. You can feel when the movie's scripted, and you can feel when it's not. And when it's not scripted, it just falls apart. The structure of the scene is just so awkward. It just kind of goes on. All the actors look uncomfortable. They're trying so hard to make what they're saying funny, but it just isn't. Kristen Wiig always does this thing where she's trying to, mumble some little nervous, awkward thing, some little remark at the end of everything, but it's just so bad. I think the worst case of this, where it's just so not funny and they're just rambling on, is the Patrick Swayze moment. They just start talking about all the great Patrick Swayze movies, and it's just so awkward. Again, I know what type of humor they're trying to do, and it's hard to just say what exactly doesn't work about it, but it doesn't work. It doesn't feel natural. It feels so forced. They're trying so hard to make that funny due to its randomness and out of placeness that it just isn't. It's just painful and cringy, and you just can't laugh at it. I will say the movie did make me chuckle a few times, to be absolutely fair. I'm not just gonna say that everything in this movie sucked, because that would be so easy to do, and yes, most of the movie does suck. But the main reason I'm talking about this movie is from a place of passion, because I love the original source material. The original Ghostbusters is a great, great movie. It's probably in my top 50 favorite movies of all time. But this is, so much of it is just not good. And I think that's just the problem, is it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like anyone wanted to make this movie. It just feels like a product. And they just go for so many low jokes, this low hanging fruit that's just not funny. I mean, the fact that they knock over the final big ghost bad guy by all shooting him in the junk with their proton pack is like, really? Is that what we're doing? We're gonna do a joke where, you kick somebody in the jewels, basically, and that's how you save the day. It's so bizarre. It's just like, you swear they couldn't have thought they had this groundbreaking comedy on their hands, but they clearly seem like they did. I don't think I hated this movie quite as much as other people did. I certainly didn't like it. I don't think it's a good movie, and I don't think it's worthy of the title or theme of Ghostbusters. But I think of it more as just a forgettable movie. It's just kind of like a sad attempt. You watch somebody try to do something great. They try to mimic it. They think they're doing it. They're like, oh, we copied the recipe by exactly the way we were supposed to, right by the book, but it just comes out awful. So the episode of Friends with the trifle, where Rachel's trying to make this trifle and she's accidentally going through the wrong pages in the recipe book and she ends up putting beef in it and all this stuff. It's like, that's what happens. They had, the recipe book for Ghostbusters and they just screwed it up. They just accidentally put in all the wrong things. And that's because the original Ghostbusters came from a place of sheer creativity. Someone wanted to make that movie. This movie is just a product that's just cashing in on a name, and it's just trying to twist stuff enough to get old fans to watch it and make it suitable for new audiences. They also do a lot of strange call-outs to the original without ever saying the original is part of this world. You have Bill Murray coming in just to get killed for a joke. It's like, we already had the movie that, you know, did a little Ghostbusters homage and then killed Bill Murray in Zombieland, and it was way funnier and it happened like a decade earlier. We didn't need it in this movie. You have Dan Aykroyd in a taxi cab for 5 seconds. He says a couple lines from the original Ghostbusters and we're supposed to go, oh, I remember that. You have Janine in one scene. She's there for like 2 seconds. She doesn't even really do anything that memorable. They also bring Slimer back and he's all CG and he's overly animated and he just looks garbage. I'm sorry. And it's like, you remember the original Slimer reveal and it was just, that was so iconic. That was like the first ghost they captured, and that one ghost had so much personality and he was so unique and his design was amazing. And in here, he's just another corporate mascot that just show off at a random point in the movie just so people can point at the screen and say, oh my God, it's Slimer. I remember that guy. I remember him. I had his toy. And the CG is like, I'm not gonna just say that, you know, CG is always bad. I prefer practical effects myself, but I understand why people use CG. It's cheaper. You can very easily make something look somewhat realistic with it. Not saying it's easy. I mean, VFX artists work very hard to do this stuff, but there's just something about it I find unappealing. You don't feel like any of this stuff is real and it's actually interacting with the Ghostbusters. And I think the best example is Slimer. There's just this weirdness about CG where everything is overly animated for CG, I think. They try so hard to make it realistic that they just overdo it completely. Every inch of a CG creature's body is constantly like wiggling and writhing and squirming. It looks kind of gross, actually. Like, I'll notice that in so many movies, like in the Goosebumps movie, the Abominable Snowman. It's just like every inch of that thing's body is like slithering. It's just weird. It's so overly animated. And even in, you know, I loved seeing Bebop and Rocksteady and Out of the Shadows, and, you know, I'll talk about that movie more another time, but even then, it's like there's just so much over animation on everything. They just do that so much with CG. They just over animate it to the point where it's moving an unrealistic amount, and it just looks so much faker because of that. And I appreciate they tried to do a new aesthetic for the ghosts in this movie, the whole green and blue glow they had going on. And it's interesting, sort of, but no ghost really left an impression. In the first Ghostbusters, you will always remember that crazy library ghost. You will always remember Slimer. You will always remember that weird ghost driving the taxi cab. You will always remember the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper. You will always remember Gozer. You'll always remember Stay Puft. Like, it's just all memorable. Those ghosts are super memorable. I can't really remember any of the ghosts in this movie when they aren't just reusing something from the original. I think the only ones I remember are, there was one with very long legs, like a circus ghost that was like a big skeleton guy, and then the final form of the main ghost, he turns into the Ghostbusters logo. And honestly, at first, it's like this hand-drawn animation of the character, almost like he's Casper. And it's actually really neat. That one little second that you could blink and miss, I actually thought was really cool, the hand-drawn animation and stuff. It was almost like a shout-out to the real Ghostbusters cartoon. But then he instantly turns into a giant CG monstrosity, and you gotta give him sharp teeth, gotta have the glowing eyes, gotta look like every scary monster ever in a movie. And they just really do nothing with him. He's barely even the focus of the finale. Like, he's kind of in the background breaking stuff while they're closing some portal. He does nothing. There's no, like, impressive face-off. And yeah, you could say the same thing about Stay Puft, is that, you know, Stay Puft becomes the Marshmallow Man, smashes a few things, and then they blow him up. But that was the first time they ever did it, and Stay Puft was there for a joke. We got it. This one, they're just trying to do the same thing. There's no reason to have the whole moment of, oh, come up with what I'm going to take the form of. That was just their way of redoing the first movie, and what they came up with is just weird. Like, he is the Ghostbusters logo. I don't really get it. Again, it's just more of like, here's some recognizable imagery and scenarios, so you're going to like it. I honestly think this movie would have been a lot better if they just let these characters breathe. If they just took all that original Ghostbusters stuff away and just let it be its own movie. But in that case, it's like, why even call it Ghostbusters? Just make a new movie that's sort of similar. They don't have to be fighting ghosts. It could be anything. I will say that in the right hands, the right writers, and not as a Ghostbusters movie, you could have these same women together in a team fighting something, and it maybe could have been a good action comedy. But this was just so horribly done. It felt like a cynical film. It felt like it was just made from a place of spite and typical like corporate, we gotta make a buck kind of place. It's just not good. And they even take jabs at the fans who complained about the movie after the trailer launched within the movie. That's never a good idea. You don't want to attack the fans in the movie. Not only is that going to make people not want to see it even more, but that's also going to date your movie horribly. You know, 10 years down the line, no one's going to remember this damn movie. But if they do watch it, they're going to be like, what was that about? Why are they focusing so much on that topic? They're not going to realize, oh, at the time when the movie was being shown off, this is the kind of thing it was dealing with. The conversation about people who didn't want to see this movie should not be in the movie. They didn't have a moment in the '89 Batman where someone makes a joke about Michael Keaton being a bad choice for Batman. That was something some people were saying back then, but they didn't put it in the damn movie. So I could go on about this all day. I think I'll just wrap it up. Yeah, there's not much to say I liked. Like I said, I like that they chose a new visual style for the ghosts. Some visuals were kind of cool, like the ghosts in the mirrors and stuff where you see their hands pressing against it. That was kind of cool. And some, maybe like 2 out of 300 jokes worked. Chris Hemsworth was criminally wasted in this movie. I feel like he's just so charismatic and funny by nature that some of his lines make you smile in this movie, but he's really not funny. He has a horrible script to work with. So all in all, not as bad as people said, but just utterly pointless. I'm gonna forget about this movie a week from today. I'm probably not gonna remember I ever saw it. Someone will mention the 2016 Ghostbusters in a month, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I still need to check that out sometime. It's just completely unmemorable. There was no reason to make it. It adds nothing to the franchise. It does nothing interesting just as a movie. It doesn't do any of these actors and actresses favors. Putting rap in the Ghostbusters theme is not going to change the fact that this is just a shallow, typical Hollywood approach of making money off of a property that a company just happens to already own. I'm glad I didn't see this in theaters, but at the same time, I have gone to theaters and paid for much worse movies than this. It's just nothing. It's just what it should have been in the first place. Nothing at all. Just never should have existed. I guess I'll be back when the new Ghostbusters comes out and maybe make a video about that. I don't usually cover stuff as soon as it comes out, but maybe in this case, since I already made this video, I'll do some more Ghostbusters soon. Hope you enjoyed, and if you want more of my nerdy voice talking about nerdy things that I love, go check out all my other videos. I talk about Ninja Turtles and action figures and Disney movies and horror movies and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Oh yeah, and at the very end of the movie, they try to hint at a sequel, and it's probably the most embarrassing attempt I've ever seen to do that since Super Mario Brothers. Do all the liking and subscribing and the sharing and the bell stuff.